So there are several things about this passage. This is a packed passage when we think about this. And I want us to talk about some of those things today. You know, despite all the modern interpretations that blame Eve for the sin of the garden, Scripture actually places the blame on Adam. Why? Maybe we've misinterpreted the sin of Genesis. You know, Scripture says that just as sin came into the world through one man, Adam, so salvation comes through one person, Jesus Christ, right? So I want us to think about what is it that's really going on here? What is the original sin? Because that too has been tragically misinterpreted. Now the easy answer is to declare that the original sin was disobedience to God by eating the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And I think that misses the point. Did Adam and Eve disobey? Yes. And I think this is no surprise to God. Right? God, who creates humans, is smart enough to know that we are in a state, as Katie Lang says, of constant craving. Every time I've heard that song, I think of this particular Bible passage. The assumption that people never disobeyed God before, this is wrong, I think. People have always made bad choices. The difference is whether they knew those choices were bad and sought to change their behavior. The real issue is the failure to accept responsibility for those choices, because only by accepting that responsibility can we acknowledge that we've made a bad choice and then seek to correct it. So think of it this way. Suppose it's winter. We've had a little bit of that in Utah, right? And ice is on everything. You head out the door, and just as you take that last step at the bottom of the stairs, you slip. But you catch yourself. Right? Did you fall? No. Despite slipping, you maintain your standing. You may have wrenched your back and caused yourself pain by trying to catch yourself, right? But you didn't actually fall. If you're smart, you find a way to melt that ice or cover it somehow in order to avoid the danger of slipping again. But if you blame someone else for the ice and do nothing to change the situation, you're likely to slip again and again, and at some point you are going to fall. That's where Adam and Eve are at this point, I think. They will not have been error-free, right? But they've not yet sinned. And I think we confuse those things. God is interested in giving them a chance to come clean. Things do not have to turn out so badly. But two things have happened since God and people last chatted. They've given moral authority over to someone other than God, and they've discovered that knowing good and evil has brought an awareness of their bodily existence in a way that clouds their focus on the soul, or the eternal. In other words, they've traded a focus on the eternal for a focus on the temporary. So Eve listens to the rationalizations of someone the Scripture calls the serpent. No, this is not a snake, okay? Remember, it's not until later that God condemns whatever this creature is to a life of slithering through the dust. But the crafty tempter convinces Eve that she doesn't know what she actually knows. The temptation starts out not as a lie, because that would be far too easy, right? It starts out as a spin on the truth. The serpent doesn't start out calling God a liar. No, the serpent starts out by asking a question. Did God say not to eat from any tree in the garden? The woman knows the answer and clarifies that God has not said that exactly, but there's a stipulation to avoid this particular tree or they'll surely die. Now, she's primed to doubt because she's answered a question with a negative. But something else has happened here too. Did God say this? Is that what God meant? Right? Mm-hmm. And now she's relying on her interpretation of what God meant rather than what God meant. Okay? She's engaging in going down a particular road with this tempter. Her thinking is shifted from what she can do to what she's not supposed to do. Okay? And if there's anything people are prone to, it's doing exactly what they're not supposed to do. Okay? That's sort of the essence of temptation. So that door to temptation is open. The serpent then presents the idea that maybe God's just jealous and tells her the first lie, that if she eats of the fruit, she will not surely die. The serpent gives her a reason to rationalize doing what she already wants to do, which is to eat that fruit, which is not, by the way, an apple. Okay? And when she doesn't drop dead, because consequences are not always immediate in life, right? She offers the fruit to Adam, who then eats it. By listening to the serpent and giving in to that temptation, she has given someone other than God the moral authority that belongs only to God. And that's the first major problem, okay? She's made somebody else in charge, whether the serpent, which is really just an excuse, or herself, for deciding what is and is not allowable, okay? She has forgotten that God is in fact in charge. But notice that when Eve eats the fruit, she doesn't immediately see that she's naked. She doesn't have some sudden realization that this has happened, right? It's only when the two have eaten and in one another's presence that they feel ashamed and naked. It's the wrong committed in the presence of another that leads to guilt. And because they have each other, they have both given in to the temptation to eat that forbidden fruit, they now see that they're naked. Right? So the question becomes, what is it that they're ashamed of? And are we ashamed alone? Or are we ashamed when someone else knows that we're guilty? Because here's the thing. If you do something on your own that you might know is wrong, right? You can deal with that between you and God. But when somebody else sees that, because you can also hide that from God, or think you can. But when somebody else sees it, you can't deny it. You can't deny that you've done the wrong because somebody has seen you do it. Right? And here's a funny thing. What happens when somebody catches you doing something wrong? The very first instinct we have is to feel shame, but we really quickly, in the very next breath, get mad at that other person. Don't we? Mm-hmm. We blame the other person in some way. Because it's far better feeling to be mad at them for catching us than to accept responsibility that we did something.